Lieutenant, fall back and give the order to evacuate all of the wounded back to Minas Tirith, and inform the quartermaster to start pulling out his blacksmiths. We can't afford to lose them if orcs cross the river in force. We'll fix our armor with what we have on hand here. At least scrap metal is not an issue with all those Uruk weapons and armor lying around. Tell him to just leave a few less talented smiths just in case, but he has to make sure the important ones are safe behind the walls of the capital. Can't believe it's come to this. Each day we turn the river black with orc blood, and still each day there's more of them on the other side. Brother, any news of that flanking attack you were organizing? It won't be happening, I'm afraid. I can sneak a few men out of Caer Andros, but not enough to assemble a proper fighting force on the eastern side of the Anduin. The entire eastern riverside is swarming with orcs, from the falls all the way to Pelargir, and my rangers report that more are pouring from Minas Morgul every day. Mordor really sent everything it could spawn at us. Here's hoping the Varyags will use it to attack before we're pushed back all the way to Minas Tirith. We can't be sure of their intentions, brother. It's impossible to send a messenger all the way to the eastern steppes now. For all we know, they may have been defeated already, or switched sides again. We should not count on... Wait, who goes there? I can hear your footsteps. Step into the light, slowly. Lower your bow, Ranger Captain of Gondor. I am not your foe, just a fool who failed at his quest. Mithrandir, what are you doing here? And why do you look like this? What happened? Men, call for the healer. Mithrandir is wounded. Sit, Great Wizard. Here, some water while you wait. By the heavens, did you fight your way through all these hordes of orcs on the shore? They tried to stop me, but I couldn't fail again. I had to bring the news back to the White City. Commanders, it is good that you are here, but I am afraid I'm not bringing good news. So, you accepted help of the Southron, and you almost made your way to Mount Doom, just for him to betray you in the end. I'm not as wise as you are, wizard, but how could you trust one of the Dark Ones with such a crucial task? I take full blame for it. We needed all the help we could get. By the time he found us, our company has been cut in half, and every step we took deeper into plains of Gorgoroth made our journey more and more dangerous. He seemed sincere in his desire to help. The princess trusted him to the end, even as he threw her off his horse, grabbed the ring and rode away. But now all of the Fellowship are dead, save for me. And the Dark Lord has the ring. Then that would explain why these orc hordes are so relentless and numerous. This is it then. We all knew there is little hope for our kingdom, but I guess now even that flicker was extinguished. We should bring these news to Father. No. Under no circumstances we should bring these news back to the capital. You know Father is tired of this war. His entire life he protected borders of Gondor from invaders, and it took a toll on him. If we tell him such devastating information now, he may break and give up, and Gondor can ill afford to have a broken man on the throne right now. In fact, we should not spread these news anywhere, else we risk panic and desertion among the ranks. But what can we do, brother? If the ring made its way to Barad-dûr, we are doomed. Nothing will be able to stop Mordor now. Maybe, but that is not the reason to stop fighting. We may fall, Gondor may fall, but if we can weaken Mordor enough for others to win in the end, then I'd say the sacrifice is worth it. And besides, you forget about lessons of history, brother. The Dark Lord had his precious ring once, and was still defeated by King Isildur. He may be stronger now, yes, but he's not invincible. Perhaps. I like your optimism, brother, but I don't think he'll make the mistake of showing himself on the battlefield this time, not unless we march on Barad-dûr itself, like Isildur did. And just look to the east. I doubt we'd be able to break through these hordes, even if we muster all the armed men in Gondor and leave all borders undefended. It could be the only way to save ourselves from Shadow now, General. But something still doesn't feel right about this whole mess. Sauron is arrogant. The ring was stolen over a month ago, mere days away from Barad-dûr. There is no way he didn't receive it from that damn traitor by now. If he has it, then why didn't he use it? Could it be that the traitor didn't make it to the Dark Tower? Mordor is dangerous. He could have fallen into a crevice somewhere, or ended up torn apart by wild beasts or orcs. If that were true, then we should consider ourselves luckiest men in Middle-earth. But I feel something is missing there, as if the Southron has some other goal in mind. I harbored some hope that maybe he wanted to be the hero to destroy the ring, but he would have done so by now if that was his goal. So I think we really shouldn't let fear cloud our judgment. The ring may have ended up in Dark Lord's hands, but it also still may be out there somewhere. And I feel like we haven't seen the end of this story just yet. A new day rose over Middle-earth as the bright sun came out from beyond the horizon. And yet, it was a cold glow, one that brought with it no warmth and no hope for the coming day. If anything, some looked at the sun and thought of its glow as some kind of mockery, for such bright glow felt out of place in a time so dark. In the north, people of Erabor and the Dunedain, despite initial successes, were now being pushed back on all sides by their foes. Angmar pushed from the north, while wildlings of Dunland and orcs of Misty Mountains encroached from south and east. The war even reached the peaceful lands of the Shire, and the halflings who inhabited it found themselves pressed into armies, forced to defend their homes. The dwarves were equally in poor shape. Rhûn, the gates of which were barred few years back, now reopened and let loose columns of vengeful dwarven warriors who marched against elves of Mithlond and men of Erabor in a treacherous attack. In Moria, drums thundered in the deep, as dwarves once more dug too deep and too greedily, and now paid the price of their golden ambitions. Their gates might have been protected from outside invaders, but could do nothing about swarms of monsters swelling up endlessly from the darkness beneath. Erabor, leaderless now, and fighting Rhûn in the east and orcs in the west, was on the verge of collapse. With the lonely mountain once more threatened, clan tribalism took over, and dwarfs split into opposing factions, desperate to save themselves by sealing their own kin in the deepest, safest crevices they could dig out, for no help would come from any of their allies, as men of Dale too found themselves in Imperial sights and scrambled to protect themselves from an inevitable invasion. The elves would not help as well. Under the dark canopy of Mirkwood, creatures of Dol Guldur and Mordor slowly but surely pushed towards halls of King Thranduil, leaving naught but death and destruction in their wake. With loss of Lord Elrond, Imladris has fallen to the shadow that emerged from Misty Mountains, leaving only a handful of high elves scattered along the western coast of Middle-earth, but they cared little about affairs of this land anymore, and thought only of leaving for the undying lands far, far beyond the sea. Only few would reach that safety though, for armadas of Ardunaim warships dominated the ocean and torched every elven vessel they could find. Even golden trees of Lothlorien were not safe, pressed by orcs from Mirkwood, goblins from Moria, and even dreaded Uruk-hai from Isengard. This once secure realm now burned, as its trees were chopped down to fuel Saruman's furnaces, while their elven protectors had no means to defend them. The realms of men fared no better. On the plains and rolling hills of Rohan, riders of King Theoden were pressed by forces of not just one but two towers, while their king retreated further into comforts of his court, hope and life gone once more from his eyes. In Gondor, men of stone still stood strong, but like a river can eventually grind down a mountain, so too their defenses slowly faltered against relentless assault from all directions. In the south, the Haradrim and the Ardunaim raided the coast, and once mighty Gondorian fleet was now nothing but ash on the wind. The great port of Pelargir burned, as sea lanes now were completely lost to the kingdom. And on the shores of River Anduin, thousands of orcs massed each day, and while so far every single one of their attacks was broken, their numbers only seemed to grow, while every day left the defenders more and more diminished. Bravery, training, superior equipment, and indomitable spirit of Gondor still prevailed, but like that proverbial mountain, it was now on the verge of being ground into dust. Dark rumors spread across the world, rumors of a failed expedition betrayed by one of its members. The One Ring, the source of Dark Lord's power, was lost, and no doubt the traitor has already presented his prize to his vile master. And yet, while the Dark Tower did continue its campaign in the west, not much seemed to change. The One did not make an appearance on the field of battle, and the few who knew of the Palantir's stones and their power felt no sudden surge of malicious power from them. Perhaps, some thought, the traitor failed in the end, and lost the One Ring once more before he could hand it over to the enemy. Others, far less optimistic ones, claimed that Sauron learned from his defeat ages ago and would not make an appearance in person this time, for after all, he had the One Ring on his finger back when Isildur met him on the field, and cut that finger with the ring off. Some warriors even cheered this as an opportunity, for they hoped to emulate the King of Old, and boasted how they wouldn't just cut off Dark Lord's singular finger, but his entire hand, or arm, or head. Most of this bragging was nothing but empty words, but commanders fighting Mordor and its servants latched onto them and allowed them to spread, for it was now the best way to counter the gloom that darkened the mind of their soldiers. And finally, in the east, the Empire of Rhûn, despite some setbacks, continued its march. The brass legions of the Golden Dragon treated every failure as a lesson, and emerged from them stronger and more determined, for the Empire was now on the rise, and it seemed as if nothing could stop it. After great Jasur and his clan Suriut submitted to the will of Emperor Rukar, all roads to the far east were opened, and with them unimaginable wealth came to Mistrand and other imperial cities. This wealth paid for more troops, for better equipment, for scouts and spies and agents, and, perhaps most importantly, for enemies of the Empire as well. Men of Dale found their armies shrinking daily as soldiers of King Bain abandoned his seemingly hopeless cause in exchange for obscene wealth paid by runic agents. The same was true for nomads of Khand, for its warriors, despite promises of their Khan, could see which way the wind was blowing, and imperial gold made switching sides all the easier. Men of Dorwinion have lost all drive to resist the occupation as well, for why would they oppose a realm which made their lives better and their coffers full of gold? The vine-makers of the Vale once feared that they'd lose markets where they could sell their product, but Far East proved to have near inexhaustible thirst for Dorwinion wine, and wealth enough to pay for it. The oversight of dragon priests or imperial garrisons were needed no longer, for money and comfort were enough to break the resistance, and did so far better than any blade or whip ever could. Slowly but surely, men of Dorwinion became men of Rhûn, a small price to pay for wealth beyond all imagination. And this wealth paid for military expansion of the Empire. It paid for mercenaries who flocked to runic banners from all over the world. It paid for equipment and training, and men who were willing to leave their lives behind and fully devote themselves to service of the Golden Dragon. Emperor Rukar ensured his men knew full well about the benefits that awaited those who served him with unquestionable obedience. The veterans could retire with wealth unattainable to most men, and as a result, imperial training camps swelled with recruits. It mattered not if an army was lost to some mistake or trick or ruse, for in its place, another, better trained and equipped one would arrive almost immediately to keep up the momentum. Nothing seemed to be able to stop Emperor Rukar's soldiers, and that allowed him and his supporters to focus on their own goals, unseen by their people. For Imperial Treasury paid not just for its troops, but also for experiments of Abdus and Charon, experiments that now, after many years and a river of spilled blood, have finally borne fruit. A procedure was prepared by Charon, one that used not elven magic or dwarven tricks, nor dark arts of Mordor. Instead, it was an act of alchemy, fueled by Dragonflame itself, that finally allowed Charon to accomplish his goal. Buried in his notes, he experimented on himself first, and when he confirmed his theory was right, he wrote to Mistrand with Abdus in tow to present his findings to the Emperor, who, without hesitation, ordered the same procedure to be performed on himself. It was an excruciating week for Emperor Rukar. The pain was unlike anything he has experienced in his life. Even Charon, one touched by dragonfire itself, barely survived such agony. Submerged in alchemical concoctions, Rukar's body first collapsed and failed, broken down, but then slowly but surely rebuilt itself, stronger and better. A week later, he emerged from the laboratory underneath his palace, looking the same, but feeling like a man reborn. Rukar's age was showing before. He slept more and worked less, as long hours ground through his stamina. His eyesight was getting worse, and he needed help to read documents from across the Empire. But the man who stepped into the glittering hall on that day was free of such concerns. His body and mind felt no weakness of his age, and instead were filled only with vigor worthy of a youthful man in his prime. The Emperor donned his field armor and took his blade, one he didn't lift for many years now, and found out he could once more swing it with no fatigue like in the days of old. His advisors gazed in awe as Rukar, filled with new vigor, praised Charon and Abdus, finally once more recognizing his son. With tears of joy in his eyes, he forgave him his cowardice, for Abdus's work more than paid for it, for he defeated a far deadlier enemy than mortal men, age and time itself. Charon warned that the results could not end up in complete immortality, but even warding off death for a century or two was a great accomplishment, and it gave the Empire time to refine the process even more. For now, though, the procedure was both dangerous, time-consuming, and exceedingly expensive, for the money used on prolonging Emperor Rukar's life was enough to feed the entire Empire for a year. But the goal was accomplished. The Empire would now have a constant, unchanging leader at its head, leading it towards better, greater, and more prosperous future. And if some, specifically chosen people had to disappear every now and then to accomplish it, then it was still worth the cost. Rukar's son and most trusted generals and advisors would soon receive such a treatment as well, and together they would ensure Rhûn would become a true superpower within Middle-earth. Now, all they had to do was to deal with those who could challenge that title. And with all the wealth flowing into imperial coffers, Rhûn could expand even more. The gold was invested all across the provinces and allowed the Golden Dragon to build more, to train more, to improve and to learn more, and then use that newfound knowledge to make its armies even deadlier. Already the Brass Legions were formidable opponents, but now new weapons and new ways to use them were invented and made their way to the front lines, catching enemies of the Flame completely unawares. The nomads of Khand were the first ones to feel the scorching inferno brought to them by their foes. Within a year of Jasur's first victory over the Varyags, he marched south and seized Amukhand, one of the major settlements on the plains, with barely any effort. Then, even as the nomads rallied to push him out, he set off to face them in the open, a battlefield where, by all rights, riders of the steppes should decimate their foes. But they were not just facing conscripts now, but freshly trained, well-equipped and organized regiments of the Lokerim. No matter how many arrows flew at the Golden Line of Pikes, no matter how many cavalry charges were launched, Imperial lines held on with steadfast determination, while longbowmen obliterated their foes at a distance. At every step, the Varyags tried to push the invaders out of their homeland, and at every step their attempts were foiled. Even support of the stout Orokarni dwarves didn't help, for that was when warlord Jasur's own cavalry took over and trampled their short foes with merciless efficiency. Soon, Sturlutza, the very capital of Khan and home of Khan Arkish himself, was surrounded, and when gates and walls were broken down, the defenders could not hope to stop disciplined ranks of the Lokerim as they pushed their way through every street. The great yurt of the Khan, a symbolic heart of the entire steppe, was pillaged of all valuables and then torched to the ground, with its defenders still inside. The rebellion's back was utterly and completely broken. The armies that charged headfirst into Mordor won every encounter against the orcs, but without any way to supply themselves so far from home, they slowly succumbed to attrition and hostile climate and wildlife around the Sea of Rhûn. And with tribes of Harad pushing in from the south, Khan Arkish was forced to bend his knee again and accept a peace offer with Emperor Rukar. Rhûn, however, was surprisingly lenient in its demands. The eastern steppe, which was already under imperial control, would stay that way, and the only additional demand was to reopen trade routes to the south again. The emissaries of Mordor were displeased with this course of action, though, and demanded complete annihilation of Khandish traitors, but affairs on Gondorian front, which occupied Mordor's entire military force, prevented them from enforcing their will, not to mention that tribes of Harad made no such deals with Khand and now pushed into the steppes themselves, eager to seize as much land as possible. As for Rhûn, though, the eastern steppe was reward enough, for with it came not only endless grazing fields for animals, but also gold and silver mines of Orokarni foothills, mines which would now fill already spilling imperial coffers even more. The nomads who surrendered were forced into them to walk off their betrayal, and soon cartloads full of precious metals departed for Mistrand, though, as Emperor Rukar soon noticed, all that gold made it somewhat less valuable than it was in the past. As for Great Warlord Jasur, he was not content to simply sit on his newly conquered province. As soon as dragon priests and imperial bureaucrats arrived to organize the area, he took his forces and marched even further east, into Orokarni Mountains, to punish dwarven clans there for joining the rebellion. Rumors said that, eventually, he even managed to track the two mysterious blue wizards who orchestrated the rebellion down, and killed them both personally in a pitched battle deep under the world. Ultimately, though, Warlord Jasur has never returned from his great campaign. Some said he simply conquered everything all the way to the eastern Grey Ocean, and then ordered his men to build boats to cross to the other side and keep conquering. Some claimed he descended into eternal darkness underneath Orokarni Range and fought beasts that not even darkest nightmares of men could spawn. But ultimately, Jasur's campaign ensured imperial domination not only in Khand, but also in great many lands in the east, which now all bowed to the Golden Dragon and marched to serve in its armies. But while Khand faced the might of the Locarim, dwarves of Erabor faced the wrath of the flame in more literal sense. Miraeren, the stronghold upon which imperial ranks have broken once already, was besieged again, and once more the brave dwarves inside goaded the invaders to come to them, to once more try their luck in the streets and tunnels beneath them. And once more the gates were broken down, but only a handful of men walked inside. The defenders jeered and threw insults, mocking seeming cowardice of imperial forces who dared not to fight them again. They pointed their axes at the handful of men who slowly and carefully walked through the gate, but the mockery was soon replaced by screams of agony. For the men who marched into the walls were not regular troops, but newly trained specialists, utilizing weapons designed by Karen and Abdus. They pointed their dragon-headed weapons at the dwarves, pulled the triggers, and within seconds, entire Ereborian formation disappeared in an inferno. The mix of dragon flame oil, dwarven moonshine, and many other alchemical concoctions burned brighter than the sun above, and the dwarves didn't even realize what was happening before hundreds of them were turned to ash. Their brave commander, the same one who months ago killed dozens of imperial soldiers single-handedly, became nothing but a scorched, contorted corpse as his armor fused with his melting flesh. The Easterlings, who saw the effect of these new weapons for the first time as well, cheered with malicious glee as a handful of dwarves who survived the initial inferno stumbled out of the flames, desperately trying to extinguish remaining bits of their beards, only for the gold-clad soldiers to fire their weapons again and end the defenders once and for all. Emboldened by this newfound power of their weapons, imperial soldiers turned every single dwarf in the stronghold to ash, But even that was not the end of devious and deadly inventions from Rhûn. For as soon as the flames died out, Uldor and Kabisa marched further on into the Iron Hills towards the great hold of Kiriggatol, and on the way linked up with yet another set of weapons made by Abdus. They rolled them all the way to the gates of the great hold, where the dwarves barricaded themselves, assured of impregnability of their defences. What they were not ready for, however, was their gate disappearing in an inferno so hot that defenders who stood behind it found their beards setting ablaze. The survivors took a look outside and saw a row of golden dragon heads staring down at them, and then, in unison, launched their fiery breaths again, clearing the gate and allowing the Easterling soldiers to pour inside and obliterate shocked and terrified defenders. These mighty siege weapons, named Dragon's Breath by their operators, were powered by even more potent version of the mixture used in the handheld devices, and thanks to larger, pressurized barrels, could fire multiple times over extremely long distances, rivaling catapults, ballistas, and even famous Gondorian trebuchets. And compared to these weapons, the effect was significantly more devastating. Entire rows of soldiers could turn to ash in seconds when caught in the sights of Dragon's Breath cannons, and walls, towers and gates stood no chance whatsoever. Only one of these weapons was rolled into depths of Kiriggatol, but by the end of the week it was proclaimed as the near single-handed victor of the siege. It didn't matter how deep the dwarves tried to hide, the flames would burn them away from any hole, or simply choke them dead if they were out of range. On the few occasions the defenders tried to face Imperial forces, the tight, steel-clad formations melted in moments, and soon the Iron Hills hold, and the area around it, were in runic hands. More of these deadly fire-throwers were used against Men of Dale as well, and once more the lake city of Esgaroth burned. Torched years ago by dragon smoke, the city was finally rebuilt, only for runic army to show up at its gates with more dragon breath cannons that turned the wooden town into a smouldering ruin, slowly sinking into the lake. From the walls of their capital city, King of Dale, surrounded by his rapidly leaving soldiers and courtiers, watched as Imperial legions set up in front of the gates of Erabor, and then, in utter terror, they gazed as stone and steel gates of the kingdom under the mountain melted into slag, as brass-clad infantry marched forward, turning everything in their path to ash. The defenders stood bravely and did their best to hold the line, but not one of them could survive the inferno unleashed by runic army. Erabor was a wealthy realm. The gold retaken from Dragon Smaug was but a small part of its current treasury, but within one day, all that gold and all that wealth turned into a river of molten metal mixed with scorched remains of the defenders, flowing slowly down into the depths. It is said that dozens of lowest levels of the hold were completely flooded by this golden river, and for many years Imperial miners would excavate this wealth, occasionally finding hints of dwarves who were not fast enough to flee. The new king of Erabor faced a similar fate. Seized by Easterling soldiers, he was given a crown of molten gold, his last, final ornament, as his people and his kingdom burned all around him. Upon seeing such deadly spectacle, King Bayan of Dale realized how desperate his situation was, and personally set off to Runic camp to bend the knee in submission. He fully expected death, but General Uldor, son of the Emperor, with all his authority ordered Bayan to stand, no longer as a king, but as a new imperial governor. The province of Dale would remain his to rule, on condition, of course, of undying loyalty, enforced by dragon priests. And though most Dalesmen were not happy with this outcome, in time they grew to be valued, though bitter, members of the Empire, though that bitterness disappeared over the years, as more wealth poured into their lands from the east, and turned Dale into a city that could rival even Mistrand itself. As for Uldor and Kabisa, their campaign was not over yet, for there were still elves hidden and lurking in the forest of Mirkwood, waiting only for an opportunity to strike. Such thing never arrived though, for Mirkwood soon tasted the dragon flame, and grey swaths of forest, including palace of ancient King Thranduil, became nothing but smoke on the wind, ending elven dominion over the woods forever. But back in Erabor, dragon priests continued their work, and soon a very special rumour arrived from the captured hold. While near every piece of gold melted in the assault, a small, simple, unadorned ring survived the flames, and was brought back to the surface, and then all the way back to Mistrand. This was it, the final prize, the reason why Rhûn embarked on this long campaign in the first place. The great ring of power now lied in front of Emperor Rukar, delivered with honours and protection worthy of a king. Rukar gazed upon it with a gleam in his eyes, but his joy did not last long. The eyes of Barad-dûr saw everything, and for many years now, the Dark Lord had suspicions about Rukar's loyalties. When word of this great discovery reached him, he sent his most trusted adjutants, the 9 Ringwraiths, ancient kings of old, to Mistrand to seize this prize. They have arrived in the Golden City on the very same day as the ring, and entered the glittering hall when the Emperor sat on his majestic throne with the ring in his hand. The Witch King, most powerful of the Wraiths, demanded that the artifact was given to him, and for a while Rukar sat there motionless, looking not at the dark visitors, but at the prize in his hand. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, he stood up, stepped forward, and bent the knee, raising the ring so that the Witch King could claim it. A noise impossible to describe emerged from under Wraith's hood as it picked up the simple golden band from its vassal, and was then replaced by a shriek of fury. This was not the One Ring. This was but a fake, made to look like the original, but only when he laid his hands on it did the Witch King feel it. He screamed his anger at this revelation, but then Rukar raised his head with a malicious smile. "There is only one master of Middle-earth, beast. Me," he said, as doors on all sides of the throne room burst open, and men clad head to toe in heavy armour barged in. The Wraiths were not intimidated though. They were immortal. No man could kill them, and no soldier dared to raise his hand at them. But those men who now surrounded them were not mere men, but warriors remade by Abdus and Charon into deadly, unflinching machines of war. Alchemical power coursed in their veins, and though it sapped their life force with every passing minute, it made them faster, stronger, and immune to fear. They knew the Ringwraiths couldn't die, but they could be banished, forced to abandon the mortal plane and return to their master to regain physical form. But to break even the weakest one was a daunting task for a soldier, except if that soldier was armed with a dragon flamethrower. The black cloaks erupted in flames as shrieks of anger turned to those of shock and pain, and moments later the 9 were turned to ash. Emperor Rukar wiped the sweat from his face. He planned this betrayal for years now, but until the very end he wasn't sure if it would work out. And even now, he was not free from Mordor clutches yet. The Wraiths were banished, but they would no doubt return, and next time bring entire might of the Dark Realm with them to punish him for this betrayal. Rhûn would face insurmountable odds, and none could tell if it would prevail, if not for the single Southron man who rode into Mistrand a few weeks before. For Sal of Umbar has betrayed his Candish fellowship in Mordor not on a whim. The Empire had its agents and spies everywhere, and Sal himself, as he said, had friends everywhere, and when the news reached him about mysterious journey that was being planned by 3 wizards, it did not take long for Imperial Spymaster to piece together the entire story. Thus, Sal was sent to join the Fellowship, and though he arrived late, he managed to track them down deep in Mordor. It was a dangerous mission without a doubt, but Sal, with his friendly smile and demeanor, was a dangerous man too, and waited for an opportune moment to spring his trap. Then, with utmost haste, he rode across the ashen plains back to Mistrand and delivered the prize to the Emperor, for which he and his entire tribe were rewarded most generously with ownership of the entirety of the island of Neburka. With the ring in their hands, Rukar and Charon had so many opportunities before them, but understood that to attempt any of them would be dangerous. Charon the Burned was a learned man. He knew that the ring whispered to him and to Emperor to use it, so that it could be found. But such was the power of Rukar's golden ambition that he resisted the call. He could see all the visions of power and glory and wealth the ring painted in his head, and shut his mind to them. For he knew that as long as this object of immense power existed, he would always be a subject to whims of Barad-dûr. And he was not a servant to nobody. He was the golden dragon, whose wings were to encompass the world, and so his mind was set upon his new objective. After the wraiths were defeated, dragon breath cannons were brought back to Mistrand and improved by Abdus and Charon, so that the flame they produced could rival real dragon flame itself. The process was long and dangerous, but now, with ring wraiths delayed for a time, was the perfect opportunity to strike. 100 flamers were brought to a dungeon deep beneath the Golden City, pointed at the ring, and fired. The heat was impossible to withstand. Stone walls began to melt, then the barrels of dragon breaths themselves began to warp. Even Charon, a man blessed by dragon flame, had to step back from this inferno. Explosions rocked the city as one by one the great weapons failed to withstand their own heat, and it seemed that the plan would fail. But after nearly an hour, the one ring began to glow, and then, with a blinding flash, melted into slag. The final dragon breath exploded, and silence fell upon the world. It was as if a cloud was lifted from Rukar's mind. He looked at his hands as if he saw them for the very first time, for he was finally free of the vile influence of Mordor. All around him, his Easterling advisors and soldiers shared the same look. A bright spark of life and freedom glistened in their eyes, and when they realized that the Emperor's plan worked out, they cheered his name long into the night. Rukar, for his part, deflected most of the praise towards Charon and his own son Abdus, for it was their invention which broke the power of the One Ring. Charon, however, said that the praise belonged not to any single man, but to the Empire of Rhûn as a whole. For millennia now, dark magic held Middle-earth in its sway, but it was broken not by different kind of magic, or some divine intervention or other mystical means, but by wisdom and ingenuity of mortal men. Everyone believed the ring could only be destroyed within the flames of Mount Doom, but in the end, it were weapons crafted by mortal men, designed not in a flash of mystical inspiration, but through hard, grueling work and experimentation. The age of ancient, elven magic was now truly over, and the age of new, golden man has begun. Across the world, the news spread quickly, for while no one witnessed the demise of the Dark Lord in person, its effects were visible everywhere. In Gondor, the orcs who stormed the walls of Minas Tirith and killed Steward Denethor suddenly became disorganized, fighting each other, allowing new Steward Boromir to retake the capital and soon push the Black Tide all the way to Minas Morgul and the Black Gate. In Isengard, Saruman the White gazed in terror at his own reflection within the Palantir, his mind finally free of the influence of the Great Deceiver. With all the power he could muster, he recalled his legions of Uruk-hai back to Orthanc, locked them up in great forges underground, and then broke the dam upon River Isen to drown his horrific creations once and for all. Rohan was finally safe, and Saruman himself was last seen marching by himself to the north, never to be seen again. In the north, people of Eriador survived their ordeal, but only by tiniest chance. Fields of the Shire laid burned. Shattered walls of Bree protected only piles of corpses inside, but from their deep forest retreats, men and halflings observed as men of Angmar, orcs of Moria, and dwarves of Rhûn have lost all drive to push forward and decimated each other in what looked like a mad power grab from all sides. In depths of Moria itself, the goblins didn't have time to cheer their victory. For mere days after they pushed the hated dwarves out of the mountains, their minds suddenly collapsed, and the darkness erupted within shrieks and screams as entire hordes succumbed to their own bloodlust. As for the elves, they had little time to celebrate either. The ones in the west were already gone, their lands destroyed either by dwarves or goblins. The ones in Mirkwood were slowly and surely burned out by the Empire and its new vassals from Dale, and over the next decade, Dragonflame swallowed not just Mirkwood, but golden forests of Lorien as well. And in Mordor itself, dreadful silence fell upon the Ashen Plains. The fiery eye that gazed upon his land for so long has simply vanished, without fanfare and without a trace. The orcs exploded in one last bout of fierce bloodlust, and soon only death and stench of corpses remained in the dark land. In time, it would be resettled. In time, its rivers of molten rock would fuel forges and refineries of other realms. But for now, Mordor truly became Land of Darkness, for not a single flicker of life remained within it. And as for the Empire of Rhûn, well, it has continued its slow and steady march in all directions, for the Golden Dragon had to spread its wings until they encompassed the entire world. There were setbacks, of course, and many generations came and went before Emperor Rukar's goals were accomplished, but thanks to experiments of Great Priest Charon, he now had the luxury of time. His sons and closest associates underwent the procedure as well, and though imperial citizens lived and died, their leaders remained unchanging for centuries to come. And though many foes tried to stop the dragon from expanding, in the end none could face a nation that mastered not just dragon flame, but secrets of life and death as well. Eventually, 4 decades after the fall of Dark Tower, imperial armies would reach flooded, abandoned ruins of Orthanc, and deep within its sunken basements uncovered the secret of Saruman's exploding powder, which swung the scales fully in their favour. Golden legions marched ever forward, and all those who stood in their way met their demise one way or another, and eventually men of Rhûn stared at the great, pale ocean in the west. Their conquest was complete. Some rumours surfaced every now and then about Emperor's firstborn son, Amdur, feeling robbed of his inheritance, for with his father always on the throne, he would forever remain a prince. Despite these rumours though, no signs of Amdur's rebellion could be seen in public appearances, and he acted like he always did, like a loyal, brave and competent son of his father. And as men of gold and brass and flame celebrated their victories, many of them looked beyond the horizon in endless seas, while some even dared to raise their gaze upwards towards the stars, for there was clearly so much more that could fall under dominion of the Golden Dragon. All it had to do now was to spread its wings even further and take it all for itself.
Wait. So you're telling me that if not for the fact that some random guard decided to get hammered on duty on Dwarven Hutch, our Emperor, blessed be his name, sure, yeah, that, but without that booze, the High Priest and Lord Abdus would have never figured out a way to melt the ring, and without it, we'd still be stuck with that eye thing in Mordor.
Seems that way. You know what they say, alcohol really is a motor of human progress.
Tell me about it. Just think, For thousands of years, a man with a sharp stick was the main way to fight a war. And look at us now, with all them fancy rockets we can lob all the way across the pond.
Serves them right, the knife-eared bastards. Turns out their undying lands ain't so undying without proper strategic missile defense.
Honestly, I kinda wish we'd just leave them alone. They're still playing around with bows there, for flame's sake. They're not a threat. Just turn them into a museum. Send kids there to see how people used to live here before. And... wait, do you hear that?
Aye, some banging from below. We did try to warn the Overseer that we shouldn't dig too deep in that area. Something's weird in them there tunnels. You know all these stories old miners used to tell about things living down there.
What, are you afraid of a Balrog? Oh yeah, you were not around during the last outbreak. Let me tell you this, brother. Sure, these buggers are big, loud and scary, but I've yet to see one that could survive a full volley from a chain gun.
Oh, I see. Feels like some mystery and fantasy got a bit lost there, isn't it?
They ain't paying us for fantasy, man. Get a grip. Now finish your drink and let's get back to work. Because I'll be honest, all the news lately really got me curious. I wonder if they're really going to use all that mithril to fly to the moon, like they said they'd do.